Grand Rising, Professor James Small. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you very, very, very much, Carl. And I'd like to get in touch with those brothers because I agree that we've got to get involved in the new financial technologies. That's the only way we're going to make it.
Right.
And you can't be afraid of it.
That too, and we need, with all this new technology, even everything that's new, even the digital age that we move into, we've got to figure out a way, Professor Small, how we can use it to enhance our position in this country or in the world, if you will, because it's a global. One of the things that the internet has made the world much smaller. So we've got to figure out a way how we can use it, whether it be Bitcoin, whether it be, any of the internet sources that are platforms that are out there. We've got to figure out a way how we can use it, even to get your story out there, how to help all of our scholars. Your thoughts on that?
Oh, no, I agree 100%. The brother used the analogy of the people who were on the bus didn't want to get on the plane and they got left behind. That's real. The technology of today, especially the technology that allow us to manipulate finance, we must learn. We watched the person who's the president of the United States. He's making billions off of new technology while he's the president in office. Well, his family is and the company is. And people are getting mad with him, but I'm not mad with him. Let me learn how to do that too and teach it to my people.
Right. We probably all do the same thing. We're in that position. You're going to help your children at some point, So
no, absolutely.
You're right. You can't get mad at it.
No, the technology is technology. It doesn't belong to anybody. Anybody with the wisdom to learn and use it, that's who's friends with the technology of today. It's like radio. There was a time there was no radio. Radio became a massive scientific achievement in terms of moving information. And it caused revolutions and everything from finances to education. And we need to use everything that's available.
That's what we want to talk about this morning. Professor Small, we got to step aside. When we come back, let's get to it, because what we have now, we need to create a new paradigm for our people. We're sitting here watching as we talk about the digital age. So hopefully you can tell us what's some of the issues that we need to be doing, whether it be social, political, financial, religious. How do we move into those spaces and take advantage of the new technology for our people? I'll let you address those issues when we get back. Family, you too can join our conversation coming up with Professor James Small. You can reach us at 800-450-7876 at 17 after the top of the hour. We'll take your phone calls next. Grand Rising family, thanks for rolling with us on this Thursday morning. Call up a couple of friends right now and tell them Professor James Small is on the radio. Just call up a couple, just two. They'll thank you later, because what we're going to discuss is really, really important. Because we talk a lot, Professor Small, about we need a black agenda. We need something to take us into the next years and beyond, because the situations around us have changed. We're now in the digital age, as the Mooney twins mentioned. But also, efforts have changed on the social, political, religious, financial ways of doing things have changed. And one of the concerns for some folks is that our people are not up to snuff. We're always on the late train. So I'm just wondering if you can help us out this morning, because the problems are still there. The problems of racism are still there. It's not going to go away. But how can we mitigate some of those problems? Some people, when something happens, we're usually a reactionary and we march and then we forget about it after it's back in the memory bank until something else happens to us as a people and we're all upset, and then we march and rally, and then a couple of months something happens and something happens to one of us and but somehow we've figured out, well, I think we should change that. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, it doesn't change the formula. The technology is new, but the formula for change is the same. One of those formulas is you've got to study history. You cannot go forward unless you know where you're coming from. I mean, you're in a place of being a blank if you don't have a history to make reference to. Knowing thyself, meaning knowing your people. For instance, I'm from South Carolina. I know I'm Lucille and Paul Johnson's son. I know I'm Susan and Andrew grandson. I know I'm Peter and Martha great grandson. I knew that they were farmers initially, and I knew that my father became an electrician, self-learned, self-taught, and then went to RCA. I knew that my mother went to beauty culture school and became a beautician, and they moved to New York and found work. I knew that my mother, who I loved more than anything on the planet Earth, was involved in the movement with Malcolm X and the Muslim movement. I knew that my father was involved in the union organizing. And all those things are the things that tell James Small who I'm going to be based on who these people in my history. Something as basic as that. Mama and Daddy did these things. Let me try to learn from those things. That's how they raised 11 kids, and nobody was on drugs, and nobody went to prison, and all of us survived, and we married and had kids, and most of us went to college, and nearly all of our children went to college. That pathway got set down by somebody, and that made up our history. That's just the most basic thing. Then what is the history of my people? I'm from the most fantastic people in the world, talking now about my ethnic nation, the African-American peoples. We have made contributions to technology that's not rival by, in the last 200 years, that no one in the world can rival. You know, we have, even under the circumstances of the worst form of slavery, chattel and what we call Jim Crow, which was a continuation of legalized chattel slavery without the chains for a couple of 100 years. And in the midst of all of that, we built something like 300 black communities. It wasn't just Tulsa. And many of them got attacked and burnt down, and we got murdered. But we didn't quit. We kept looking for new ways. We built bus companies because that was the modern thing of the time. How do you move masses of people to work? That was new technology. So in Raleigh, North Carolina, we says, okay, the white bus company won't carry black folks, so we're going to carry the black people. We built our own bus company. And when the white bus company couldn't compete, the city came to us and asked the black people, can you move the whole city? And so we became the bus company for Raleigh, North Carolina. That's just one thing. Or we go and look at the turn of the century with Maggie Walker down in Richmond, Virginia. Her mom and dad was born in slavery. Maggie started the St. Luke's Penny Association because we couldn't bank in white banks. And she built one of the biggest bank, black or white, in Richmond, Virginia. She was able, from the wealth of that bank, to open one of the first department stores in this country, and at the time using black mannequins because no one else would use them, and hired all black women. She had an all-black women department store down in Richmond, Virginia. They tried to deny her in history, but she, with that capital that she amassed from the St. Luke's Penny Saving Association, she built this massive bank. She was able to loan money to black people in Richmond to open business, to buy homes, to send kids to college. It's like the formula is the same. The technology is just going to enhance how we do it. Everybody should get on board and learn AI, not be afraid of AI. We need to master AI. I'm getting ready to do the AI classes starting next week. You know what I'm saying? I'm 80 years old, right? I'm on Instagram. I'm on X. I'm on Facebook every day. People call me because they see me up 2 and 3 in the morning. I'm kicking it, using the technology to spread information. I'm a historian. So my thing is, how do I use this technology to spread information and enlighten my people on things economic, political, and cultural? Because that's my thing, you know.
Well, that's where I was going. How do we use the new technology to get that message across? Because now we're at a sort of a crossroads, if you will, or a inflection point in our community living here in this country. Some people decided that it's time to go back home, quote unquote, home to the continent. Some people want to remain here. You've got an idea what will work in Africa and what will work in the United States. So that's why we have you here this morning. For the folks who are thinking about relocating, giving up on this country, I want you to help them out. And the folks are going to stay here because not everybody can go. That's the reality. So some of us are going to stay here because we can't go.
Most of us are going to stay here. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. We stay here because we built here. And the way to really understand that, again, you go back to history. We built here. You tell people we built here, past the cotton fields, past the sugarcane fields. Look, there is no technology in America that we weren't involved in creating, from the electric light to the telephone to the computer to the chips. We have been involved in all of it. We just haven't been involved in owning it because of the racism and the laws and rules. But without us, the technocracy that makes America the wealthiest, most powerful country in the world would never have happened. So now we've got to study history so that we can understand how can we best then use that technocracy for ourselves.
You know, Doc, I tell folks all the time, we 28 minutes after the top of our family, those of you going to work at school this morning, I guess it's Professor James Small. Professor Small, we have some of the smartest, the brightest minds working in this country, overseas, all over. But they're working for the other folks. They're not working for us. How can we corral? And we don't need all of them, just a few of them, to do what you're doing. You know, using the history of our culture to move us as a group of people, move us, forward instead of just sitting there, because their contributions to the world and people, they don't get the recognition. We don't know who they are, but we know that every sector of society, business, finance, whatever it is, we got people who look like me and you, family, but they're just working for the other folks. How can we get some of those people, pull some of those folks back?
I'm dropping the magic word again. We've got to study history. History erases the mystery. Look at the ethnic group or racial groups that are doing the best economically in the world. And the one thing they have that others don't have is a tight, united racial grouping centered around specific cultures or cultural events. And all a cultural event is the commemoration of something in the history of the group that is significant, and the group can relearn over and over to use to advance itself. And so we've got to learn how to be a racial group, how to be an ethnic group. I don't want to call their names, but just look at the ones who are successful and see what is the things they got that you don't have. That little word, UNITY, we take it for granted. We're talking now Ubuntu, it's you and me. Well, let's stop using the cliches and let's build Ubuntu. Let's build the kind of unity where I shop. If I've got to do ads and I need ads on the radio, let me go to Kathy Hughes and her network, because that network is feeding the Black community. Let the Black community, elements of the community who hear my ad, shop with me. Then we say, oh, I can get a better quality. I can get it cheaper if I shop with this other group who's not African, but then you're building them. You want to build yourself, you've got to learn the price of shopping with me, because that's what makes the other group so efficient. That unity.
But how do we get that word across?
Unity comes from having a knowledge of history, Carl. It seems so simple. People don't want to catch it. In your history is the glue that binds you together economically, politically, and culturally. It is the cause. All content have intent. What is the intent of our content? Meaning our economic content, our political content. We're going to spend this year over $2 trillion in North America. Now, what is that money going to be spent on, and who is it going to be spent with? If our content have an intent that don't allow us to aggregate that money in the way Claude Anderson said, then we're going to stay in the same position. Be the $1 trillion Negro or the $2 trillion Negro, and we still living in poverty, a large segment of us. Now, let's be clear. Most of our people are not impoverished, but a large segment of our people is impoverished, okay? And that large segment interferes and disturbs the progress and the solidarity of the group that is not impoverished. And then, so poverty then affects the entire group, whether you are homeless or not. You may be in Maryland, where the median income in your city is $200,000. But if you got to worry about me coming in your city and stealing your Mercedes because I need to get another fix because I'm stuck in D.C. and hooked on heroin, you're as impoverished as I am. So what do we do about the situation of our unemployed? What do we do about our group, meaning our racial unemployed? What do we do about our unemployables? What do we do about those who can't afford to be healthy? And the only people that can solve this problem is those of us who have the degrees, those of us who have the wealth, those of us who have the businesses. We've already proven we know how to survive. How do we then make the others know how to survive? And we can't do that unless we realize we have a relationship. We have a relationship, and in that relationship, we have an obligation. Look at the successful groups. We can call them. Look at the Chinese group. Look at the Jewish group. Look at the Vietnamese group. Look at the white Anglo-Saxon group. Look at the successful group. We can call them all the names we want to call them. They are successful around things economics. They're successful around things political. They're successful around things cultural because they have one thing in mind as the intent of their content is unity. See? Without that unity being your intent, you're not going to be able to aggregate your content. Then that cliche is nice enough for y'all. You got to take your content and allow your intent to determine how that content is used.
All right. Professor Small, 26 minutes away from the top of the hour. We're coming to the holiday season now, and we saw what the boycott did to Target. I'm not sure if you heard the latest news. They got to lay off a bunch of their folks and cut back because they're not getting the traffic that they used to get. And this is all, Jamal Bryant started this. And we're coming to the holiday season. And Dick Gregory used to talk about this, but he was straight up. He was saying we should boycott Christmas. But he says we're too connected to Christianity to give up, celebrating Christmas.
Well, it is the method of boycott. We should boycott. We're not going to get our people to boycott Christmas as a holiday because it's embedded in their spiritual being. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you have to. We adopted Christianity because we were in this condition and the situation in America, and we use it to our best advantage. Those who adopted Islam in Africa did it the same way. Islam wasn't born out of Africa, yet almost 50% of Africa are Muslims, and they've adopted the Arab Islam and made it an African Islam to use for themselves. We've got to be able to understand that being Christian don't mean succumbing to the culture of another group, because that group is doing Christianity, but they're not succumbing to African culture. They're not succumbing to Asian culture. They're using that Christian system to advance and promote and to unify and to ethnicize and to moralize themselves for the sake of them being able to be a healthy family, a healthy community, and a healthy nation. We have to be clear. And technology is needed in all of this, because the biggest technological advances in the world today is the communications technology. We talk about social media like it's poison when we talk about it in the black community. No, social media is one of the highest use of technology in the world today and is making people billionaires and trillionaires because of the information flow that you now have access to. But you can't say, yes, you love the new technology, and I know most brothers and sisters my age, they're not using it. They barely know how to use a cell phone. They're afraid of using a cell phone, let alone using Instagram or using Facebook or getting up every night like I do and spending an hour putting together your story, a message, a photo essay that carries a message about black people, that you hope they learn from. I heard my brother saying, we love Professor Small. Well, they don't love me because I got the name Professor Small. It's because I spend hours and hours and hours sharing information that is useful for the economic, political, and cultural development of the African group.
Right. And hold that thought right there, Professor Small. We got to step aside for a few moments. I'll let you finish up. And we also got a tweet question. Tudor says, please ask Dr. Smalls if most black households are headed 72% by women, many uneducated. How can we ever reach a critical mass of educated and skilled blacks needed to move us forward? I'll let you respond to that when we get back. 23 minutes away from the top there, family. You want to join this discussion with Professor James Small? Reach out to us at 800-450-7876, and we'll take all your phone calls next. And Grand Rising family, thanks for staying with us on this Thursday morning with our guest, Professor James Small. Professor Small is one of our top scholars. He's a grill in our community. He's got the answers for us. And I mentioned earlier, you call up a couple of your friends that, they're not listening, who you think need to hear this message. They'll thank you later. Tell them to tune in because Professor Small is going to be bowling down their alley today. Before we left, though, with Professor Small, the tweeter said, please ask Dr. Small if most black households are headed by 72% women, and many of them are uneducated, how can we ever reach a critical mass of educated and skilled blacks needed to move us forward?
First, most black households are not headed by 70% women. That's too high. Most black households are headed, there's about the national stats that's just been out last month, about 25% of black household was headed by women who don't have spouse, and about 50% is headed by women who do have spouses. And so what we're talking about, and at the same time, women are also leading in home ownership in the black community. And the formula is simple. Women have a greater access and a greater success rate in education than the black men by almost 50%. And so that gives them access to jobs and finance and income that the black men don't have. And that's not a complicated formula to understand, that education leads to better employment, leads to greater financial development, and allow for you to access housing, food, and clothing in your community. Because you remember, the bottom line, we can say all the things, the pretty things we want to say. The bottom line is, can you provide the food, the clothing, the shelter, and the safety for yourself and your family? How do you do that? That's the prime motivation for the world. Let's keep it simple. We're going to college to do what? To make money. We want to make money to do what? To buy food, clothing, and shelter. Let's stop making it complicated. You don't go to college to be a lawyer. You want to be a lawyer to make money. Someone said, I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a doctor. No, you're doing all of that because that's going to lead to an income that's going to allow you to provide the fundamental necessity that all human beings need: food, clothing, shelter, and safety. Let's be real. Let's keep it. I think the kid says keep it number one, or keep it 100. We try to miss the point. If you can't feed yourself, you're impoverished. If you can't clothe yourself and house yourself, you're impoverished. How do you get rid of the poverty of not being able to do food, clothing, shelter, and safety? Everybody wakes up in the morning with that aspiration in mind. Everybody across the world. And so if you look at the rate at which black women are getting degrees, they're getting degrees at a higher rate than any other group, men or women in the world. If you look at the rate at which black women, because of access to that degree, is making capital that's allowing them to buy homes, they're buying homes at a higher rate than almost anybody in the world, except maybe one or two communities, maybe the Asian community in certain sectors, and again, the Jewish community in certain sectors. So you tie, education's got to be tied to income, because income is motivated by the need for food, clothing, shelter, and safety. And so the black woman isn't leading the household because something wrong with black men. The black woman is leading the household because the black women have had access to education, not just higher education. If you go down to elementary school, the manner in which black males are handled in elementary school, junior high, and high school determines whether they're going to make it to college or not. And the manner in which black women are handled by teachers, black or white. And so the control of education should be an essential element of the black community, because education isn't about getting fame, or education isn't about talking about great accomplishments. Education is about, can I provide food, clothing, shelter, safety at the end of the day for my family? And most of those households where the statistics says black women are the head, what they mean is that the black woman is the leading income maker for that household, that the black woman more likely owns the house and she more likely owns the car. But there's a male in that house. His income may not be, in most instances, is less than 50% of what the income of the woman is. So we have to also be clear on how we look at this thing and not get played in pocket by other people talking about gender distinction, and be clearer about family development. So it doesn't really matter who's bringing the income into the house. I certainly couldn't compete with my wife, who was a medical doctor, in terms of the income, but I did everything that was necessary to make sure she could go to medical school. We had children all along. I used to be called Mr. Mom because I go to my work with one child strapped to the back and two in a stroller. Made space in my office for them. You know, I made sure that she could study and do all the things she needed to do because that income was going to help their family, not their woman. And so we managed to be together for 54 years and raised 6 children and gave them all a college degree and graduate degrees so that they can learn how to raise their family by being able to financially support their family. So education and income is tied together in a knot that one should not even want to untie. You see? And so that brings it back down to the basic politics at the local level in every black community in the country. You must control the basic politics at the local level to determine the type of education quality that your children's going to get, so that that next generation would be able to do more financially for themselves and being able to provide food, clothing, shelter, and safety. So we come back down to the basics. You have got to vote. But if you are educated not to vote, and a lot of people in our community, unfortunately, are saying it doesn't do any good and we elect these people and they're corrupt. Yes, all of that is going on in everybody's community. Now, how do you get control of your situation to minimize those things? We just saw a mayor in New York a black mayor, get driven out of office with false innuendos by the white press, who has never proven any charges against the man. And we saw that the biggest black administration in the history of New York City is about to be dismantled by other ethnic groups who did not fight for any of these things, because we allowed ourselves to be manipulated by the technology and the media of another ethnic group. So black people need to make sure that the information that informs them on how to develop a community is in their hands. And we've lost most of the media in New York. We haven't any real black media in New York to talk about. I think one radio station and a newspaper, they're stumbling on whether it is a black information network or not. And so all of this is tied together, though, Carl. You can't separate your information, the thing that informs you of how to survive in the economic, political, and cultural arena, from the things that educate you to be proficient in it to such a degree that you use the technology that make yourself necessary for industry so you can make income to come back home and put that food on the table, buy that house, pay that mortgage, buy that car, pay those college tuition. That's what this is all about. We got to make it simple. But at the foundation of it, you got to vote. You got to learn how to run the political apparatus in your community. You got to run the city council that makes a decision on how much money goes to education. You got to be able to be the policeman. You can't say, I hate the pigs, I hate the police, but you keep leaving it open for the right-wing racists to come in and get those jobs and police your community, when we have enough black males and females in our population who are tooled enough and skilled enough to become the people that run the security of our community and guarantee the safety of our population. It's a common sense thing. And this doesn't change whether you live in Africa or in America. You're not going to go to Africa and not need policemen. You're not going to go to Africa and not want to own a house. You're not going to go to Africa unless you can make an income to pay your bills. and provide the food, clothing, and shelter. You may get some advantages of the stress being removed, not having to live under the stress of this racist, dominant society that's sickening. But all of the other basic needs and necessities will remain the same. So how do we meet those obligations? And so first you got to make family your core, not the black male, not the black female. Black males can't have children by themselves, and black females can't have children by themselves. Black males and black females both need the emotional love of one another. And family should be the key organization that you're struggling to build. In order to build that organization called a family, and yes, family is the first most primary organization that you are a part of. How do we build and maintain that organization called a family? We got to provide food. We got to provide clothing. We've got to provide shelter. How do we provide food, clothing, shelter? We got to be in control of the economics. We got to be in control of the politics. We got to be in control of the culture where we live, in that geographical space we are living and sleeping every night. How do we get control of that? We've got to tooled and skilled ourselves through education. I can't say it any simpler. I've broken it down in the most common denominator. And then you can put all the frills on once you've accomplished that basic.
Gotcha. 7 away from the top of the hour, Professor Small. I got some folks want to talk to you already. Let's take our first call to Atlanta. Sean John is reaching out. He's on line 1. Grand Rising, Sean John. Your question for Professor Small.
Grand Rising, Professor Small. Call. A fan of yours, Professor Small's, all the knowledge and information you put. Professor Small.
Thank you, sir.
Y'all want to get right to it. Okay. And I'm with you with everything. And what we have to do as black people to come together and formulate our own and have our own. So these groups who really come over here, I know we give them clap, like they did this, they did that. But you got to understand too, Dr. Smalls, too, that, and I know you know, when we go as an African Americans or black people to try to get small loans at banks, we're not approved. When they come over, say they group, they'll put 15 in a they'll come over, the Asians who've got the gas stations, they have the wig shops, they have, the nail shops, all of that. So they say, so we can't, they want to approve us because, they took everything from us. And the best way to destroy a race is to take away their ability to produce or produce income.
I agree with you 100%. Let me respond to that, right? First, don't blame the victims. Those other poor people coming over looking to feed their family with food, clothing, and shelter. They're not coming over attacking us. They're looking to eat like us, right? Let's look and see what the formula is. We know that the white, racist, financial institutions and individuals are afraid of only one group, the African Americans. 1, because we are the second largest ethnic nation in America. 2, because we have a different direction. 3, because our relationship to the motherland of Africa, which some people are trying to deny foolishly, will allow us to tap into the largest source of wealth in the world if we had the organization and the technology to do it. And so what we've got to do is make some fundamental decisions. Do I shop at that wig store that is not black? Or do I get together with a few brothers and sisters and tool the money we do have and open a wig store worthy to be shopped at that is black? Now, that's the decision you got to make. You can't say, well, there ain't no black wig store, then damn it, open one. Okay. Do I go to that gas station that's owned by other ethnic groups that don't hire my people? I organize my community. We make a demand. You ain't selling no gas up in here because we ain't buying no gas. We ain't got to even pick at you. We just send a delegation there with a letter. We will not shop with you unless we see our people employed as they're represented in the community, which in most cases mean the majority of your employees have to be black people. So they can learn how to run a gas station and eventually put their money together and open one. Is buying into a franchise that requires capital. We are going to spend over $2 trillion this year, so we have the capital. We do not have the sense of what group organization and race organization is. And I know a lot of people, and I know my little sister may jump on the air and talk about Manzani. I'm not interested in Mr. Manzani. I'm interested in black leadership. We had black leadership in New York. You didn't have to like Mr. Adams' demeanor. Mr. Adams hired more black people to run government in New York City than any 5 mayors before him ever did. And you're not looking at that. All of that is now going to be lost because they're going to all be replaced. Right? And you didn't understand the value of that because you didn't like his demeanor. You didn't understand that New York City, right, has $1.15 billion. Oh, no, $115.5 billion as its main daily budget. It has $173.6 billion as its 10-year capital budget. All of that was in the hands of a black mayor who was distributing it for the first time across the racial line pretty equal. He was distributing it to the Asians, to the black, to the white folks, to everybody. And those folks who was used to having 100% of that under their control now was relegated to 50%, and that's why Adams had to go. Had nothing to do with his speaking to Trump, because Mondani is going down to dine with Trump today or tomorrow, and nobody's going to vilify him for doing it.
Right. Hold that thought right there, Professor Small. We're going to take a short break here so our stations can identify themselves down. I'll let you pick it up and tell us what's going on in New York City when we get back. Family, you too can join us and speak to Professor Small. Reach out to us at 800-450-7876, and we'll take your phone calls next. And Grand Rising family, thanks for staying with us. And our guest, Professor Small, we're discussing our future. What should we do? Before we left for the break, he mentioned that Mondani has in control of a lot of money, in billions of dollars, in the city council. And before Mandana, we also had David Dinkins was mayor, black mayor. But Professor Small, you go uptown, go up to Harlem, go up to 125th Street, or most of the business is still black. I mean, still white. That's part of me. So how much control do they really have? That's my question, though.
Yeah, well, the point is, people don't understand the nature of America. The politics in America is race politics. Now, Mr. Mondani, he's probably going to be put forth an excellent effort. And I don't take anything from a brilliant young man. But he's not my brilliant young man. He's from another ethnic nation, and he has multiple other interests pulling on him to make him deliver for their community so that they can have the food, clothing, shelter necessary to raise their families. I'm saying we saw what happened. What crime did Mr. Adams commit that he should not be the mayor? What promise did Mr. Mondani or Mr. what's the other one name that was running the other two? All of them were saying the same thing. Mondani was smart enough to use technology and A1 and organizing with the youth to make his message of housing. Everybody was saying they want to bring the price of housing down. Everybody was saying they wanted to bring the price of grocery down. Nobody said anything different. It was how they were saying it. And it was where the main media was. The media, the same media who was attacking Adams, was the same media promoting Mondani, and none of that media was black-owned. Now, what was that message that we're supposed to get from that? And I gave the budget of New York that says right now that's in the hands of mostly black persons, all of whom will be out of office in a few months, and it will be in the hands of other ethnic groups. You think those other ethnic groups going to address the black issues? Even on the night of election, the young man mentioned every ethnic configuration in New York except African Americans. Now, that may have been a Freudian slip, but history has told me better. History erases the mystery. And back to us, Carl. If we're going to spend $2 trillion, and back to the brother from Atlanta, don't blame the immigrant population. They're just people looking for jobs just like us. And yes, we know the racists prefer them because they're not going to put a demand for racial change on America. They're trying to join the racist in his behavior and culture while maintaining their culture. We are the group that's fighting against the racists. We are the group that's forcing change in the structure so the racists see us as primary enemy number one, meaning the Black American grouping. But we can't get caught up in being the enemy and becoming the enemy of the new immigrants. We need to win them over to our side, let them understand what the reality of America is and how they're being used to help to marginalize the African American. Complaining about them is not helping. Driving them more in the enemy camp is not helping. We need to get wiser and how we do propaganda and share information, just like they do. And our money, that $2 trillion in our hands. Are we going to find a way to aggregate that $2 trillion and go to a Black community like East St. Louis that's 98% Black, yet we own hardly 10% of the business? Are we going to go there and buy East St. Louis out, buy the other ethnic out so the 98% Black can run East St. Louis? Who's sitting now? What sorority or fraternity or Black political or economic organization is coming up with a plan to do that in East St. Louis and all the other East St. Louis in America where we are the majority in that community? We've got the plan as a Black people. We have been planning as individuals with the aspiration of joining the white club, hanging out in the white spaces, and not even showing the dignity and the integrity that a people should show and responding to the group who have committed the worst genocide in the history of the world against us over almost a 500-year period, because we don't have a memory. We don't understand our history. And we minimize and marginalize history, and so you got to make the dollar. You make the dollar, and you spend it with the people who are going to make sure your son and your daughter can't make the dollar. And I hope I'm making sense without complicating things, because it's not that complicated.
No, you are making sense this morning. Truly. You're making sense this morning at 8 after the top of the hour. Let's take another call for you, though, Professor Small. Tyrone's calling from Maryland. He says he has a political question for you. He's on line 2. Grand Rising, Tyrone. You're on with Professor Small.
Grand Rising.
Grand Rising,
Small.
Brother. Yes, sir.
Brother, this is the time where the youth have to challenge the elders. Brother, you started a storm on this radio the last time you was here. You might not even know it.
I didn't know it.
You just said a key word. We must not drive our young people into an enemy camp. Brother, when you came on this station the last time and you said that we should participate in everything that America has to offer, including the military. And ever since you said that, brother, it's been a storm on this radio of people who disagree with you and people who agree with you. So we've been in debate, and Brother Quasey knows this because I'm a father over 8, 4 boys and 4 girls. There's no way that I will allow anybody being under the teaching of Elijah Muhammad for 36 years who went to prison because he refused to go into the war. Now, it is against the law to get on this radio station when a war has started and tell our young people not to go in. You can be arrested for that. But before the war starts, you can say that all day and every day. Now, if you said it in the perspective of that they should go in the military like the spook who sat beside the door, take what they've learned there and bring it back and use it to teach their people guerrilla warfare, many people would agree with you. But because you are a scholar and we respect you, you know what's happening with the lie that they're telling in Nigeria to go in and justify killing and ravishing those people's oil like Argentina.
Okay, but $40 billion. Don't give me too much to remember now because I'm old, right?
No, because I'm going to end with the point. But you know what's happening in Venezuela. They are getting ready to go to an unjust war. So why should we tell our children to join the Crips and the Bloods and be used on the front line, as Brother Quasey say, to be killed when we know this is an unjustifiable war that they're planning to take these people natural resources and use our babies to do their dirty deeds. Why should we tell our young people to go in that military?
But you just made a narrative that I'm not going to buy into your narrative. That's the first thing. Yes, the Honorable Elijah went to jail for resisting to go in the military. I went in the military and I resisted going to Vietnam. And you want to hear my story and all the other black men who resisted going to Vietnam, and we were in the military, and some of us were court-martialed, and some of us got killed, but we didn't go and fight. Many went to fight because they didn't know any better. They didn't know what we knew. I went in the military already having met Malcolm X and was already informed by many things coming from the Nation of Islam and from my parents. My father served in the military. My brother served in the military, and all of them came back home and served in the black movement, and most of them became Muslims. So this thing of somehow our minds are so weak that we're going to go in the military and all of a sudden we're going to be a bunch of enemies of black people. That most of the men that helped build the black community after the Second World War were black men who served in the military. So don't let's give a false narrative. Somehow we're going to lose our minds completely. I didn't lose mine. And many of those young men I struggled with didn't lose theirs. And my friends who got blown up in that truck, 15 of them in Da Nang, we were all resistors. So that's a myth that we one of the things, we haven't been able to stop the Bloods and the Crips slaughtering our community. They look just like us, and we haven't stopped them, and they're all in partnership with the white crime drug dealer, and a big part of those drug dealers were the U.S. government itself. Let's study real history. Most ethnic groups in this country use the military to advance themselves. It's just like you got to use the police force. You got a police force right now in most black dominant city, and the police force is still predominantly white. What is wrong with us? Something sick about that. And we can't rationalize why we should, in droves, join that police force. One of the pathways to being a policeman is to use the military. I don't care what he's saying about Nigeria. We know that these people are our enemy. What's happening in Nigeria isn't nothing new. They're supporting the very groups that they're talking about. They created the Al-Qaeda in Africa. They created Boko Haram. When Nigeria could have destroyed Boko Haram years ago, America stepped in and stopped them. So let's study the history so we know the mystery, we can see the trick as how it's really playing, and we can make the narrative what it really should be. We know we're dealing in the most vicious government in the world. There isn't a single war they've ever had that was justifiable. The war against us every day by the American intelligence apparatus is not justifiable. But if we don't get some skills, if we don't get some training, if we don't use this country to advance ourselves, there is no dignity in going to prison and you can't take care of your wife and kids. I've taught in enough prison and I've embarrassed enough brothers. What are you doing here? While somebody else is taking care of your wife and children out there. And you giving jobs to white folks to cook your food and to be your corrections officers and to be your parole officers and to be your lawyers. And you're going to glorify that. You can't do that. We've got to use the system like everybody else. And some of us is going to be lost in that battle. But we're getting lost now and we're not achieving enough of what black males should achieve. Our household shouldn't be 50% black female running it financially. It should not be 25% where there's no spouse in that household. That's our fault, black men, because we're not learning the lessons of how to build in a society. And yes, some of us going to get lost in the wars of the white man if we go into his military. But most of us will come back home with skills and tools and position to better our family if that's our goal. But I don't see the goal now. If we can do that without going in the military, I said, fine, do it. But this opposition to military and police is foolish because we've never really taken on the challenge. A few brothers in the Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army challenged the police militarily. We're not in a position to militarily challenge America. Stop dreaming. We're not in position to do that. We're not in position to wage guerrilla warfare. We tried that. I was one of those guerrillas that tried that and survived. But what we are in position to do is build the black community. Use what we've got. We've got nearly $2 trillion. We've got to learn how to use it. but you can't use it effectively if you can't get control of the municipal apparatus that run the community that you're in. So me, I don't care nothing about the American military. I don't care nothing about the American government, and I have not, no matter what the season was, I've criticized them. You know, but what I do care about is that we are smart enough to watch other people who are successful in using the apparatus of America, using the military, using the police, using the fire department. Most black community in America, our fire department is still 75% white. That makes no sense. So how do we get access to those things? Most of our postal services in most black communities is still majority white or others. That makes no sense. What are we talking about? We've got this money. We obviously working. We're one of the most educated group in the country, especially our women. And if we can spend $2 trillion, we've earned $2 trillion, and that ain't the corruption money. So how are we using it? We don't know how the system works. People say, well, I don't want to be in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, then start a third party or fourth party or fifth party. And if you can't do that, you better use the party that's in place. Because if you don't take control of the politics where you live, somebody else is going to be in control of that. If you don't take control of the real estate where you live, somebody else is going to own that. You can complain all day about how they won't give you the small business loan. They shouldn't give you because you are their enemy. So why are you giving them your $2 trillion if they won't give you the small business loan? It's a common sense question, and it comes to people being organized.
Right. And hold that thought right there,
being unified.
Professor Small. Hold that thought right there. We've got to step aside for a few moments, family. Some real talk going on right now. He talked about people going to war and coming back. Geronimo Pratt was an example. Learned what he did in Vietnam and came back to help us. What are your thoughts? 800-450-7876 to speak to Professor Small. We'll take calls next. And Grand Rising family, thanks for staying with us on this Thursday morning with our guest, Professor James Small. Professor Small, one of our griots, one of our scholars. And you got a question for him, reach out to us at 800-450-7876. Got a lot of folks want to talk to Professor Small. Yeah. If you're on hold, please make your question short.
So I was saying, Carl.
Well, go ahead, Professor Small.
And yeah. I agree. We know the dangers of dealing with a demon and the demon rats that run this country, especially when you're talking about the military. But we've got to also be smart enough to weigh what is the value to us in building a black community. If we're going to stay here, we've got to build a black community. We can't be here complaining about who owned the gas station, who owned the bodega, who own all of the stores that we're spending our $2 trillion with, and we can't even determine whether the school our children going to is teaching them to read and write. Okay, our behavior and our expectation about identity as a community has got to change. And a big part of that is coming from studying history and knowing how we got from where we were in Africa to where we are today. And for those who said we were here before Africa, yes, some of us was, but we're not where we was when Columbus got here. We're in a situation now that we need to get the hell out of. So let's figure out how to use this tool called America to our advantage. That's all I'm saying. I'm not pro-American military. I've fought it all my life. I'm not just a scholar, and I want people to don't be playing on that scholar stuff with me because I was in every aspect of the black movement you can be in, physically. Been in the jail, beat up by the cops, thrown in the 77 precinct in Los Angeles, beat up and thrown in the precinct in New York. I was in the streets. I'm not just a scholar. I don't even like the term. I'm talking from experience of being in the struggle, being in the movement and fighting, raising a family, having children, watching what my mother and father went through, learning from that and realizing that we must provide food, clothing, shelter, safety. Then we must protect that once we provide it. We must run our community. We can't constantly leave all the major apparatus, the police department, the fire department, the postal department, the sanitation, in the hands of our enemy and be feeling good about that. We can't talk about we need education, and our schools are full of some of the most racist people in the world, or some of the most misinformed black people in the world, not loving and not teaching our children to be their optimal selves. So we've got to take responsibility if we want perfection, to create the environment in which perfection can happen, and that means we must take over and control that environment. If you can do it without going in the military, if you can do it without joining the police force, I'm with you, but I know you can't. Because I'm watching the other people getting ahead of us by using these instruments. We are watching the immigrant communities from all over the world using these same instruments to step up and run our communities, while we sitting around talking about why we're not going to use it. And then back to the black youth. No movement in the history of the world have been successful without the youth, because the youth have always been the majority of all movements in the history of the world. But the youth lack of experience have always required having elders as a part of the council and the leadership on how that movement will go. So it isn't the youth versus the elders or elders versus the youth. It is the black family using all of its elements so that it can be successful and build a successful future around things economic, political, and culture. That's it.
25 at the top there. Henry's calling for Baltimore. Family, if you're on hold, just make your question short so we can get as many people on to speak to Professor Small. Henry, Grand Rising, your question for Professor Small. I don't think Henry's ready for us. Let's move on, Kevin. Let's go to Eric on line 1. Eric's in Forestville, Maryland. Grand Rising, Eric, your question for Professor Small.
Good. Grand Rising, Mr. Dr. Smalls and Mr. Nelson. Just put this out. Recently here in the last 3 weeks, we've had several police shootings where police have, I'm going to call murdered individuals. One I know is black. I tried to confirm whether the other one was black. And they used the same scenario. He reached around in his waistband, he pulled a gun. He lunged at me with a knife or a screwdriver, and they unalived these people. Yet you got a police chief and a mayor to go. I mean, they seem like they naive to it, and they use the same scenario time and time again with this type of. And I suspect that another murder will be coming by way of the police real soon. I hope not. How do we get rid of these people at the top, Dr. Smalls? That's the gist of my calling in for.
And I understand you thoroughly, because we have black cops who have become quite racist, because that's the culture of those who run the police department, and we know that's to be true. And we have black cops who we should fear more than we fear some of the white cops. But unless you put black cops in there that you don't have to fear, nothing's going to change. You've got to take control of the police department. There's no logic or rationale why a community does not control their police department. And if the persons we have in their face, being black or whatever, is not doing their job, we should be controlling the community political apparatus to move them immediately. Now, we've got to be responsible for controlling the economic and politics and culture where we live, not leave it in the hands of a few Negroes who just see themselves as having a career and making money. But we as a black community got to control those things. That's how the people in Jewish communities, the Jewish cop is not shooting Jewish children. Asian cop is not shooting Asian children. Now let's ask the question, why not? Because the community is in control of whoever is running those precincts. We're not in control. We're leaving it to the Negroes that was trained by white folks. And we who say we are the progressives and we are the militants, we're sitting back having a conversation and a criticism because we're scared to jump in that water and swim or sink. Meaning we are afraid to take responsibility to run the politics of our community. If you don't like the Democratic Party, then run the Hutu Party. I don't care how you do it, but if you don't get control of the city council seats, and you don't get control of the community boards, and you don't get control of the school boards, and you don't get control of the educational committee or the sanitation committee through this electoral process, then somebody else is running your life. And they're going to shoot you down in the streets. Some's going to look like you. because they're becoming a part of what that's saying. That's the police department in Washington, D.C. is still a white department, still a racist Klan department, philosophically and ideologically. Let's build a community police department that understands that they're there to protect that community and not to be cops, quote unquote. We have no excuses. I don't care what nobody says. Don't even come to me with that stuff. We have no excuses why we don't run the police department in our community the way it should be. We have no excuses why we're not dominating. If people are going to prison, then we better be the corrections officer. We have no excuses. Complaining isn't good enough. That's the first step. Yes, you got to complain. Criticizing, that's a step. You got to criticize. But you got to get to the step where you transform that situation with your mind and body and bring change by you being the change that you're criticizing. And we don't seem to be able to make that step in a large enough number. Some of us are doing it, but in a large enough number in most of the cities in America. There's some cities where black people are running their communities, but the overwhelming majority of the black communities are being run mostly by white persons and other persons of color who have no respect for us and do not know our history because they came over here just to get some food, clothing, and shelter, and we're not the ones providing them access to that. And so they are loyal to the people who are providing them the access to the food, clothing, and shelter. Now, what are we going to do about our food, clothing, and shelter? Complaining is the first step. Now, what is the next step? Transforming. How do we transform? We've got to learn how the system works, and then we got to run that system once we learn how it works.
All right. Hold that thought right there, Doc. 30 minutes after the top of our family. Professor James Small is our guest, and hopefully you are understanding what he's saying. There's some real talk conversation taking place. Professor Small, Mark from Anaheim says hello. He says that even though the U.S. Supreme Court Brown versus Board of Education ruling may have occurred in 1954 in Charleston County, South Carolina, he attended all black segregated public schools in the early 1970s. As someone who spent most of his childhood in segregated South Carolina and segregated Virginia, now that this nation is headed into Jim Crow 2.0, says it saddens him to see so many people who have been suffering what he terms the illusion of inclusion, who are now panicking. He says, worse are the people who are not suffering the illusion of inclusion, but who are often gaining success, claim to be apolitical as an act as if they did it all on their own, repeating the ridiculous pull up yourself by your bootstraps mantra. Says these folks are so ignorant they do not even realize that quote was originally meant as sarcasm because it's physically impossible to pull up yourself by your bootstraps. He goes on to say, now we have such a successful people as Pharrell Williams spewing bootstraps and meritocracy mantra in relation to elimination of DEIA programs. It's not DEI, it's DEIA, and Pharrell never mentions the A, just as most who discuss it. The A refers to the handicap, and including the A would make it more difficult to criticize DEIA programs. He goes on to say, I suggest such people as apolitical Pharrell Williams sit down and watch the films, The Josephine Baker Story in 1991, introducing Dorothy Dandridge in 1999, which depict blacks who are often becoming successful and suffering from the illusion of inclusion, found themselves slapped back into reality, leading them to becoming very political. What say you?
Well, that's a lot for me to respond to. I mean, and you answered most of the questions yourself, but at least at the most basic level, that DEI, I don't even respect the concept. See, when we let other people create the narrative, you've already lost the game. And DEI implies that people were given jobs because of the color of their skin and not because of the skills and talents they brought to the table. And we know that that's a lie, right? We know that if you came to that table and you didn't have the skills and talents, you didn't get the job, even when the worst enemy or even your friends was behind the desk. So we've got to stop letting people create the narrative and then put a definition. When they throw DEA out there and got everybody thinking that DEA means I hired you just because you were black. That's the biggest lie in America. So don't play in the lie and then try to bring it to some kind of sensible conclusion, because you're not going to be able to do that because you've already accepted the lie. Segregation never ended in America. There's no sign that segregation ever ended in America. Integration never happened in America. What happened in America was what was called integration, was the dismantling of the black economic apparatus across this country. Brown versus the board never changed education because the education achievements of black folks dropped exponentially after Brown rather than rise. You know, Brown was designed to destroy the black socialization process of black children. It was never designed to be an advancement. If you don't believe me, study the history. Start with Harold Cruz's book, Plural but Equal, you know, and get a sense of what integration was really about. Brown versus the board came about when there was three other cases, including another Brown versus the board that was right there in D.C., and a case out of South Carolina and one out of Virginia with a young lady who was asking for something very different. They were asking for the proportional return of tax dollars to the black community so that we could provide the quality of education for our children that the white community who was getting the appropriate capital was doing. And somebody said, if we give all this money back to the black community, it's like the black school, I forgot it was in D.C., that was the highest performing high school in America, and they destroyed it. Well, that wasn't the only high performing high school in America or high performing elementary school in America. Look at the performance of black children prior to Brown versus the Board of Ed, and look at the performance of black children after Brown versus the Board of Ed. Look at the loss of black teachers that we lost after Brown versus the board, and black principals that we lost, and black control of a school board that we lost, and black control of a content and value that we lost as a result of Brown versus the board. So don't let other people create a narrative and have you buy into that narrative, and the narrative don't tell a story but doing what it should have done. And I'm not ashamed to say that we went for the okie doke. And we've been paying for it. You go to Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was burned to the ground, Greenwood. But go out to Tulsa. I was out there multiple times before any presidents went out there. I'd march in the street until they had to put me in a wheelchair when my knee went out and I couldn't do it anymore. And Tulsa, Oklahoma rebuilt itself better than it was before Greenwood was burned down. And they'll tell you it got destroyed by integration when we thought shopping in the white community was a better deal than shopping in the black community. We thought the white economic apparatus was going to integrate with the black economic apparatus, and it did just the opposite across the country. So let's study history so we can get rid of the mystery and see what the result of it was on us. And America is as segregated today as it was 100 years ago. Go in any city in America, and you know exactly where the black community is, and you know exactly where the white community and other communities are. And it's segregated. We're the only ones that was talking about integration because somebody else was leading our agenda, our nice liberal friends. And the only thing that got integrated was our dollar with their businesses.
A shade of that. Hold that thought right there, Professor. 800-450-7876 to speak to Professor James Small. We got to take a short break at 23 minutes away from the top of the hour. When we come back, we'll take your phone calls. You can reach us at 800-450-7876. Your calls are next. And Grand Rising family, and thanks for spending part of your morning with us and our guest, Professor James Small. Just before we go back to the callers, let's just remind you, tomorrow is Friday. I give you a chance to free your mind and reach out to us in our Open Phone Friday program. We're going promptly at 6 a.m. Eastern Time, right here in Baltimore on 1010 WOLB, and also in the DMV on 1420 WOL. Professor Small, we got a bunch of folks. We've got questions for you. If you're on hold, please make your question short so we can get as many people speak to Professor Small as possible. Let's go to Los Angeles on line 3. Dorothy's reaching out to us. Grand Rising, Dorothy, your question for Professor Small.
Grand Rising. You discussed the importance of going to college, but I wanted to ensure that trade schools are also critically important for African American males. Getting a trade in construction, drafting, billing, technology, and all the other plumbing, all the other trades is important, and many times you can make more money in those fields and starting your own businesses with a trade. So I just wanted to ensure that trade obtaining a trade is also critical. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy.
No, I agree with you 100%. And there's nothing else to add to that is that trade schools have always been a part of our community when we were at our most prosperous, to the point that they don't exist now. If I make a call right now to any online company and says I have a plumbing issue, I would watch every ethnic group in the country show up at my door except the African American ethnic group. If I says I need plumbing, roofing, everybody will come because it goes out there on the network and everybody will start calling me to get the job. And we have to also, as a community, see, you can't talk about trade schools unless you're talking about a community. Trade schools out there, but a lot of this work is learned through apprenticeship. I'm a plumber. I learned plumbing through 8 years apprenticing under a master plumber. We still have, especially in the southern sector and in the D.C. area, we still have black plumbers, black electricians, black roofers, black house painters. How do we get them to work with creating an apprenticeship program for black youth? Because we can't wait for people to establish schools to teach trade. It's coming back in America, and people are advocating for it, and we're seeing more of them develop. But you can build even faster by those blacks who have those skills apprenticing black youth. But that comes from the whole community being involved, because most of our people still go to churches. What is the church role in socializing the mind of the young people? We can't let them off the hook because people don't want the criticism. You know, you look in other community, their religious organization is tied to youth mobilization, tied to youth socialization. In our community, we are tied to selective youth socialization. The minister's daughters, the deacon's children, the school teacher's children, and the banker's children, but the majority of people in the church don't get access to these possibilities, and that's my critique of them. You can't just be there to worship God, and God don't tell you how to provide food, clothing, shelter, and safety. Every other community's religion do that. The Catholic Church runs schools, and the majority of the people in much of this country going to Catholic school is Latino Americans. And the Catholic schools are some of the best in America, preparing those children to compete. What are we doing? But 90% of our people still go to the churches. Are we taking responsibility for the socialization of the youth? And so, yes, I agree with the sister 100%. That's where the money is. The people who come to be the plumber, you need a plumber every day. You need an electrician every day. You need somebody to paint your house every day. But how do we get back into those trades? Because now everybody got to be licensed and so forth and so on. So the few of us who are licensed need to start opening an apprenticeship program for the black youth. And then fighting to struggle to get trade schools where in our cities where we live. That comes back to the basics I was talking about. If you don't get control of your city council and you don't get control of your school board, you're not going to get trade schools. And you're not going to control the city council school boards if you don't register to vote. And you're not going to be able to do it if you don't take that vote and use it wisely.
Thank you for connecting the dots for us. 14 away from the top of the hour, Professor Small. Sister Pereira is calling from Baltimore, has a question for you. She's on line 4. Grand Rising, Sister Pereira, your question for Professor Small.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Nelson, audience, and Professor Small. I happened to notice on yesterday a program I listened to in Morgan State that there was some young people that did a disturbing act this past Monday morning, and the school paid no attention to them. And after school, this lady and her son were ganged up on, and she's pregnant, and her son was protecting her. And you have people that watch it of all ethnic backgrounds and classes, and they have a GoFundMe page set up for this lady who was harassed on her way home with the school, and what should be done with parents who need to take accountability and people who need a lot of teaching across the board when it comes to their children and how to treat other people. What should be done about this? Because these were elementary schools.
That happens in every school and every ethnic group everywhere in the world, and you solve it by organizing your community. You solve it by having a common race, culture, and consciousness. You can't be a bunch of strangers that hate each other and operating as individuals based on ego and arrogance and attachments and other kinds of way of communicating. That person, that child, feels no kinship to the other child and feel no kinship to that adult. And we are the ones that have allowed this kind of environment to exist in our community. Both the victims and the victimizer are victims of the lack of culture, the lack of an ethical, moral base that comes from having culture that binds people together. People think things like history is mundane. Everybody that is successful use history as the foundational base. Everybody who's successful as an ethnic group must be united. Everybody that you find that's united have some sort of cultural glue that keeps them united. You can't have a bunch of individuals using fragments of other people's culture and wonder why they hate one another. It's because they hate themselves. It comes back to the simple basics that we keep running away from. We never solved the problem. We never taught Black studies to our community. A handful of radicals tried to get it into college and into schools, and our people, the very people we brought it to help, fought against it. So now there's hardly a Black studies program in a school. But basic American history is white studies, and it works. Jewish synagogue teaches Jewish studies, and it works. Does Black churches teach Black studies? No. Now, how do you socialize your children? Socialization means how they get their values, their interests, and their principles. Whose job is it to socialize the youth of any community? The parents and the spiritual institutions that is supposed to give the ethical, moral guidance to that community. And everybody want to be off the hook and leave it to the one injured, broken family that will commit the crime. Why are they injured and broken in the first place if you have a community? I feel sorry for those who were victimized by the other victims, but they're all victims because we are failing to organize as an African people. You know, and every time it looks like we're going to get something going as an African, we come under attack by people who look like us. Now we got people attacking Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism simply means a unified African people. Why would you want to attack that? That is so foolish. But yet people are trying to take the term and make it something other than what it means. It simply means Black people unified around things Black. Black political interests. Black economic interests. The Latino community is not trying to organize the Black community. The Asian community is not trying to organize the Black community. The Jewish community is not trying to organize the Black community. The Irish and the Italian community, they're not trying to organize the Black community. They're organizing their community around the best interests of their children because that's the future of the community. And we need to learn how to do the same thing. If I'm playing basketball, I'm going to watch the team that's winning and learn some strategies and techniques from that winning team so that my team can win also. And that's what we need to get busy doing. And it's basic and fundamental and haven't changed over centuries. Food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security. Everybody got out of bed this morning either knowing or trying to find out where they were going to get food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security for that day. That's the motivator. And that requires having money, capital. And getting money and capital requires having skills, education. And getting education is being in control of the politics where you live, so the apparatus that allows for you to access that education, so you can get that capital, so you can provide the housing, the clothing, and the shelter for your people. It's fundamental, people. Stop making excuses why you're not voting. Stop making it, if you think the voting don't work, then you can't complain when there's no results because you didn't involve yourself. Let's use every tool we have.
Let's see if we get one more call from you, Professor Small. Hey, Rick is calling from Laurel in Maryland. He's on line 2. Grand Rising. Rick, your question. Can you make it quick? Your question for Professor Small.
Yes, sir. Morning time. Hey, Professor Small.
Good morning.
Yes, sir. The psychological effect to prison to war. You got an option. If you don't go to war, you go to prison. So now,
no, that's not true. I didn't go to prison.
No. I'm just trying to say something real quick. If you go to war, you're going somewhere that you don't want to be. Like, okay, it's a possibility that you may not make it out of war. To embarrass people that's in prison to say you should be home with your wives, teaching your wives. But it's a possibility if you say and learn something from being in war, you might get killed. So it's a psychological thing to be somewhere when you don't want to be, period. Prison or war. You understand what I'm trying to say?
I agree with you, but don't say embarrassing them, because we do have responsibility.
Absolutely.
And we're not deaf, blind, and dumb to the point we don't have responsibility. We make decisions. And we have to make decisions on how we make decisions.
Yes, sir.
Ali
made the right decision.
Yes, sir. And some of us don't make the right one. I've committed criminal acts that I didn't get caught for. If I'd gotten caught for the few burglaries I pulled, I'd probably still be in the penitentiary. But I didn't get caught. That was just the luck of the draw. But then I learned how to make better decisions. And you can't just learn on your own. I was lucky enough to be a part of a community where people were trying to make better decisions, where there were people from the 5% nations, where there were people from the Nation of Islam, and even from my church. You know, there were people in my family who had been into the world and came back and taught us. It's about struggling to organize yourself, to unify yourself. It isn't prison or. Most black people never go to prison, okay? And we seem to think we can only tell our stories about those who were on drugs or those who got killed or those who went to prison. That's the minority of our community. But not one of them should be in that situation, because that minority, which is injured in that way, come back home and help to injure others who never would have gotten injured if that person hadn't gotten injured. So when I told folks in prison, I want them to get out. I want to motivate their ass to leave that prison and go home and never come back. You know, because you got there by behavior sometimes, and we know we've been trapped and tricked and framed and all of those things as well. But don't posit that as why not go in the military, because if you got an alternative, then don't go in the military. But don't tell me you shouldn't do this. I'm saying that is a pathway to taking control of your community when you get back home, because of the skills and the experience learned. And we see it being done by the Latino communities, using it like a stair step. And yes, there's wars, and you're going to get killed in the wars. You know, like I said, and there are people who don't have to fight, but you can resist. I resisted the war, and I took the court martial, and others did too. But everybody isn't going to do that. And I'm just saying, what are the tools you have to get some freedom? Don't tell me why you are not going to get freedom. Don't tell me why you're going to stay stuck in the mud. Tell me what tools are around you that you can use. Maybe that military isn't a good tool. Then find another tool. But we can't stay here and say we're spending $2 trillion and we're committing the crimes we're committing against our community. I know some people are angry with Eric Adams, and I wish he didn't bring it back either. Stop and frisk. But those same people weren't doing nothing about the amount of black youth and black women being shot down in the street by young black men who didn't even know how to use a damn gun that they had in their hand. So you got to have one or the other now, or you got to find another way to do this. Right. But don't tell me that, you know, that what I'm offering is so bad when you're sitting by watching the bodies count go up.
Right. You know, we got to stop it there. We're just about flat out of time. A bunch of folks want to talk to you. So we got to get you back, because I know you're going to Africa before the end of the year, correct? You taking a trip? And
that's right. And everybody should give me a ring and jump on board. I'm going to Africa to do all the historical and cultural things, but I'm going there to party and hang out with a bunch of black folks from all over the world that's coming to Ghana. That's become the place to come and meet each other and know each other, and begin to start investing in African countries and African industry in the wealthiest continent in the world. We need to learn those people, learn their culture, learn how to invest, learn how to buy real estate, learn how to open businesses. I think something like 96,000 Americans have applied in the last year for jobs in Africa. And 70% of them are white folks. You know
so
what I'm saying?
Startling.
We've got to wake up.
Yeah. Professor Small, so how can folks reach you real quick? Because we're going to try and get you back before
the
you leave.
quickest thing is telephone number, 914-960-2693. 914-960-2693. Get it again, 914-960-2693. Because we're going to have a good time, but we're going to do business too. And we're going to learn about the educational things in the continents. We're going to bond with our brothers and sisters who was left behind to that form of slavery and colonialism when we were brought to this form of slavery and colonialism. And we're going to get to know each other and heal each other and bond with each other and build the black nation we want to see.
All right. Thank you. Class is dismissed for the day. Stay strong, stay healthy. We'll see you tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock, right here in Baltimore on 1010 WLB, and in the DMV on 1450 WOL.